CommonBondz speaker series event. I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday season. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Mike DiCandido. I am the co-founder and board chair of CommonBondz, and you'll hear from April, our co-founder and president, at the end of the session. But really appreciate you guys joining us for our first session of the year, and really excited about the topic we have, and hearing from Larry and Ron and Tamika tonight. Just for those of you who are new to CommonBondz and our speaker series, our speaker series is named after Zoe Rogers. Zoe was a former CommonBondz board member, a young lady who unfortunately passed away in October of 2020. So we dedicate our speaker series events to Zoe, as well as a number of our activities, particularly our initiatives around mental health. So we always keep Zoe in our mind and in our prayers, and her family as we have these sessions. Just a couple of administrative things, then I'll introduce our esteemed guests, and we'll move forward. We ask you guys to keep your audio and video off if you don't mind. The chat feature that you see on the bottom, I think we're all very familiar with Zoom, is the feature that you can go ahead and ask questions. So as we're going along, feel free to put your questions in the chat, and Ron and Tamika will address those questions as we go along. And we're looking forward to a great session. So without further ado, let me introduce our participants. First and foremost is our esteemed guest panelist, Larry Watson. For those of you hopefully have seen a lot of the promotions we did on Larry and his wonderful background and career. To let you know a little bit about Larry, he's an experienced performer boasting over 35 years of performing experience throughout New England and around the world. He has traveled as far as Singapore and Malaysia, delivering his own special brand of music. In 2018, Save Ourselves Productions and Consulting, in which Larry is the executive director and founder, concentrated its musical and educational efforts in China. That unfortunately was paused a little bit due to the coronavirus, but Larry is looking forward to getting that back going and focusing his efforts on East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Africa. Larry's also recently published a long-awaited book of original music and all-time classic standards. The book, entitled HEM, focuses on what he refers to as highly emotional music. In addition, the book offers the audience 33 classic songs with accompanying illustrations by young artists of color, and all the illustrations in the book visually capture the intention and spirit of the songs. Larry, being a master teacher and a professor up at Berklee School of Music in Boston, has used the opportunity to highlight often overlooked young talent in America, and continues a long legacy of collaboration between visual and musical artists in the Black community. With the comprehensive curriculum of HEM, it'll eventually become the textbook of choice for several music programs around the globe. Larry is a graduate of the State University of New York at Oswego. And we're going to talk a little bit about a wonderful event that Larry is going to be hosting up at Oswego in early February as we go along, that we're going to encourage folks who are in the central New York area to attend in person, or if not, it'll be a recorded and simulcast session. So Larry, welcome, and we are honored that you're joining us this evening.
Thank you.
So we also have the great pleasure of having Ronald Klein to be our moderator. As many of you know, we are really fortunate with CommonBondz to have KeyBank as our lead sponsor of the speaker series program, and KeyBank also working closely with us on the park renovation that we did, making a generous contribution for us, and also will be working with us, and you'll learn more about some of the financial literacy initiatives we're going to be doing in the city of Philadelphia that KeyBank will be working with us on. But we've asked Ronald to moderate tonight, and Ron is currently a senior area retail leader for KeyBank. He has responsibility for 17 retail bank branches covering a span of seven counties in central New York. In addition to leading the retail branch teams within his market, he also directs small business, mortgage, investment, and relationship household growth initiatives. He's had a wonderful 32-year career with Key in banking, predominantly with Key, and has held senior leadership roles in learning and development, consumer lending, mortgage, and retail banking. He's a graduate of Onondaga Community College and the State University in New York at Oswego. He stays very active with both universities, working with current student, alumni, and career development, mentorship, and collaboration opportunities. He also is very active in the diversity initiatives that KeyBank has. And we're, again, honored to have Ron moderating for us. And again, very honored to have a great partnership and relationship with KeyBank. So with that, Ron, I'm going to hand it over to you and you can get us started.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Looking forward to tonight's discussion. With me, I have Tamika Otis. Tamika is our Corporate Responsibility Officer. She has responsibility for Central New York and Capital Region for all of our corporate responsibility initiatives. So we're going to tag team this together. As Mike said, Tamika is going to man the chat, and depending on the flow of the chat, we'll certainly go to Tamika for a question or two as well. So Larry, are you ready to get going?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Got a lot of questions for you and looking forward to learning a little bit more about you. So the first question I have for you, Larry, and our audience is, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, your upbringing, and how you developed a passion for music?
Well, music was always a part of my life. I want to thank you all for having me. It's really exciting, and it really is humbling to be in the presence of all of you who are working so hard at your craft. Music was always a part of my life, and I attended Uproom Baptist Church as a young boy. My parents mandated that we go to church every Sunday. And there was a woman, May Chambers, who was the pastor's daughter. And I would listen to her sing, and I was so intimidated, but I was so drawn to it. So I was a closet singer for many years. I could never sing like May Chambers, but I did like singing. So music and singing saved my life because there was gangs and there was drugs, and then there was Motown music. And Motown gave me an opportunity with some guys who were seen as kind of chumps to trade albums. And this was the period of Motown, which people consider to be the soundtrack of young America during the 60s and the 70s. And so we trade albums and we listen to music. And a few years ago, I met Barry Gordy, the founder of Motown Records. And I started telling him my story, and I started to tear up because Motown saved my life. And the Black church saved my life. When teachers were telling me in school, when I went to school and said, I want to become a musician, they said, we have enough Negro singers and dancers. We need some more doctors and lawyers. And so they refused to allow me to apply to music programs. And they refused to allow me to apply to a four-year college. They said, in this era of affirmative action, they might admit me. And so what happened is I saw a brochure in the guidance counselor's office with trees and bushes and water, and it was Oswego. And I snuck behind the scenes and applied to Oswego, and I got admitted. And so my background from that point forward, I read one book in junior high school, Robert Louis and Stevenson's Kidnapped, one book. They just let us play in the halls at junior high school 57. I got into a special program at Thomas Jefferson High School. And at that high school, I went on to have greater aspirations in playing in the hall and singing Temptations and Supreme songs. And so I still went on to Oswego and majored in education and history, and then proceeded to sing, still in the closet singing. Never was a member of the state singers or any of that, but I would go and listen at the back door. So that, in a nutshell, is my background. I grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn. I credit my classical training with the Black church. The Black church trained me. And if any of you, while we're doing this podcast, will look in Webster, and when you ask Webster to define classical music, they define it as serious music. So that means that Duke Ellington and Stevie Wonder and James Brown and Aretha Franklin are not serious in what they did. Students and people are always shocked when I tell them to look at that third definition in Webster, and it says serious music. and then it tries to explain this foolishness. So that is how I started. I spent a lot of time in the church listening to this great music, but being too intimidated to do it. And I realized earlier on that the spoken word is not more important than, that the written word is not more important than the spoken word. And that has governed my life and my teaching and my outreach to people.
All right, great. Thank you, Larry. I think that's a great explanation of question number one. You know, I had question number two written down, but I wanted to go back to a comment that you made that you know, telling the story that Motown saved your life. I think that's really interesting, and it plays into question number two, and maybe you can expand upon that a little bit further in terms of how it saved your life and telling that story. But tell us how you became such a renowned storyteller through music. I've met you a couple times now, and you do tell great stories and very captivating. And why do you feel it's so important?
Well, as I said before, we've been indoctrinated in our great society to see the written word as more important than the spoken word. But my earlier training in the Black church was classical training in every definition of the word. And I realized that what we say matters. And so I always, even though I had skills that were not measured properly by standardized tests, I always could run my mouth. And I always wanted to use my mouth and my tongue to, in fact, give people something else about who I was, to change the stereotype of who they thought I was. And I can remember growing as a young Black boy, my father always would say to me, Butch, that was my name growing up, Butch, watch that little red thing in your mouth, because it can get you in a whole lot of trouble that you can't get out of. So over the years, I have used my ability, my verbal abilities and my singing abilities to, in fact, move people in ways that others might not be able to. So I can remember being on panels at Harvard University, where I was a resident artist at the Harvard Law School after I had left Harvard as an administrator. And I would get up and sing a song. And then after I sang a song, the keynote speaker would be Cornel West or somebody, and they would get up and they would spend the next 15 minutes talking about the song I just sang. And so I realized, there's something here. Then as I began to read and become a historian, I realized that Dr. King had asked Reverend C.L. Franklin, could he borrow Aretha on some of his early speaking around the world. And Aretha would travel with Dr. King, or Miss Aretha Franklin, later Aretha Franklin, and she'd always sing before Dr. King spoke. Then I remember to realize in the church that Mae Chambers always sang before her father, Reverend Chambers, got up to speak. Then I began to look further and see that that was the protocol of the Black church, that you had to have that soloist. And the soloist didn't always have to have the beautiful voice. They could have a broke down, cracked up voice. But when they got up to sing, they moved people in a way that the very poised singers could not. And so I think that the way Motown saved my life, it gave me an alternative in the same way the Black church gave my parents an alternative. I could choose drugs, I could choose gang war, but I chose instead those songs that gave me inspiration and gave me a platform by which to go forward. And so I have used that. Lyrics kind of govern my life. And when I teach, I usually start out singing. And then at a music school, students say, he's singing. I say, yeah, we're at a music school. So not to break the tradition, I want to do something for like 20 seconds to further illustrate the point the question you just asked. Ain't it sad about Mary? They took her only son and nailed him to the cross. Ain't it sad about Eve? She could not foresee that the apple from the tree would banish her and Adam from their garden. Ain't it sad? But if we could start all over again, would we change or would we relive all our sins? Ain't it sad? I think that 30 seconds of a song can tell a whole historical record lesson. And I chose to do that piece because one of the lines I left out that I'm going to put back in is it says, "Ain't it sad about Martin fighting for human rights, dying by human hands, shot down by his fellow man? Ain't it sad?" And then it says that line, "But if we could start all over again, would we change or would we relive all our sins? Ain't it sad?" A 2-hour lecture could not raise the issues that that one song by Zulema Couchot is, which I named my show at Oswego after a song she wrote many years ago called American Fruit with African Roots. 1 minute can make a difference. And now, Ronald, I'll end by saying, Black folks in the South, when the Klan was coming to burn the churches down, they would hear, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine everywhere I go." And the Klan would turn around and go away.
Very powerful. Thanks for sharing. And wow, you know, Tamika, I was going to ask another question, and I was going to have you go to the chat, but I can see, you know, you're pretty lit up. I'm going to go right to you, Tamika, and have you respond to question number 2. Maybe check the chat and maybe ask a question or two, and then kick it back over to me.
Well, what we have in the chat so far is, "Holy smokes, this is amazing." That's what we have so far. We don't have any questions as of yet, but yes, Ron and I have been working together for a long time, so I know that he can see the glow on my face. First of all, as I listen to you sing, because when we met each other last week, I talked about the memories that I have of sitting at my father's feet as he would play records and turn them into tapes that we would listen to on our way to see my grandmother in Connecticut, and just how much that inspired my life. And really, you saying that music saved my life. In a lot of ways, I feel the exact same way. But one of the things that I was really struck by was that definition of serious music, that they said that, you know, classical music was serious music. And so you told us briefly how Webster defines serious music. I would love to hear how you define serious music.
Serious music is why I've chosen to abandon the traditional terms, because they're too loaded. And that's why I call my book and what I do HEM, hymn music, highly emotional music. And so therefore, I'm not bound by any categories other than the fact that serious music is music that moves the soul and also in some way or another is functional, and it goes forward in educating and keeping people in touch with their emotions and their logic. You know, for a long time, women and Blacks in particular, and brown people women have heard this, "Oh, come on, can we can we just not be so emotional? Can we be serious for a moment? Can we be logical?" And I think that the notion of logic is so antithetical to the culture and the history of Black music that saved Black people doing what we call our MAFA. It's a term we use for our Holocaust, MAFA, M-A-A-F-A, West African term. That one woman, Marimba Ani, wrote a book called Yurugu, Y-U-R-U-G-U. And Yurugu is a term the Dogon people use to describe those who are not in touch with their emotions and allow logic to completely overwhelm them. And so she says they're not in touch with nature. So serious music is that musical expression, no matter what kind it is, country, pop, blues, whatever, that allows people to act in a human way and not feel as deviant to show emotion. For me, as a 6'3" Black man, I don't have to feel insecure if I shed a tear when one of my students in my class is singing and hits a chord in me that makes me know I'm still alive. That despite all I've been through, despite that all we go through as people of color and oppressed, disenfranchised people, that we still hold on to that little light inside of us that makes us shine. And so Chinua Achebe, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature, he says it this way. He answers Descartes with art for art's sake. He says, excuse me, everybody, I'm apologizing ahead of time. I'm gonna say something that's gonna be a little off-putting to some, but we love you and I love you. He said, art for art's sake is nothing more than deodorized dog shit. And that has become the philosophy of many African people who see art as functional. What you mean you're gonna cut that tree down? You're gonna sing this song and in the middle of the song, you're gonna curse my mother out. You don't cut that tree down. That tree was planted when my great-great-great-grandmother fought off these colonists that came into to conquer the village. And so serious music to me is functional music that heals people, that makes you happy, reminds you of your sadness. It is a workable music that you can touch and feel, and it never loses its glow. And that's why we have songs that go way, way back that people still sing. In the civil rights movement, people would sing and they asked the old Black woman, 99 years old, walking down DC, what are you doing here? She said, my feet is tired, but my soul is rested. And so to me, serious music has to make your hairs on your arm rise. You don't have to have the best voice in the world, but you do have to understand the power of words and what my father said about that tongue. You got to understand that you're dealing with a very dangerous weapon that can be used to heal, like a surgeon heals with a knife, but it can also be used to destroy people. And we've got to look at that in terms of the kind of music and the kind of cultural expression that we embrace.
Awesome. We do have a question in the chat that kind of goes along to one of my questions that I wanted to ask you around the context, the historical context around the importance of music as it relates to slavery and our ability to communicate with one another or express emotions, because in many plantations, we were not allowed to use our native language. We were not allowed to talk to one another. And another story I remember my grandmother singing songs, and just like that song you sang, This Little Light of Mine, I remember what it meant to me as a kid in church, but she broke down that same story to me and told me, and would sing different hymns that I was used to, but tell me the real meaning of back then, the message that they were trying to relay through the song. So we do have a question from April, who is asking, Mr. Larry, can you further explain how messages were in the music during slavery and even now in Black culture?
Well, remember that it was against the law to teach us to read. You could be killed if you got caught teaching a slave to read. Frederick Douglass was sent to a Baltimore plantation, and the woman who was the wife, she was a very wonderful lady, and she started to teach Frederick Douglass how to read. And when her husband found out about it, he said, you can't teach these slaves to read. You will create something that is a monster. So what I'm saying is, on the plantation, and even before the plantation, we always use songs to complement and to reinforce values within the society. So when we got put on those ships and brought here to the, quote, New World, we still were singing to communicate. It didn't have to be the same language, but within the music was rhythm. And Duke Ellington said, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. In other words, if you can't swing, if you ain't got no rhythm, then you're not doing music, you're doing something else. That's what Duke Ellington said. People didn't want to hear that. So within the music was this double consciousness and was this symbolic coded message. Duke Ellington was cussing people out. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Like, you think you playing, but you're doing mathematics. You're not doing music, you're doing mathematics. So in the same way, in the bows of those ships, you heard a white slaver heard that coming from the bows of that ship, that traditional, typical melody. And he wrote the words to it because he was, in fact, a criminal and a murderer. And he wrote those words that now is the most popular hymn in the world. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Now, the Africans weren't speaking English. And so when you hear that melody, you can trace that melody back to traditional melodies that were sung in Africa before there was slavery. So we need to understand that we had a life, and we communicated through the drum and through melody long before we got on the slave ships. And the misnomer and the notion that Africans arrived here tabula rasa, a term in psychology means empty tablet, and we heard some white hillbillies or some people up on a hill singing, and the Africans said, "Oh my God, that's a melody." And then from that, 600 Negro spirituals are written. It's absurd that in fact we had a sense of melodic sophistication, we had a sense of harmony, we had a sense of rhythm. For Black folks and for music, it is a triumvirate: melody, harmony, and rhythm. Many music schools and others forfeit, they really shy away from the rhythm part of it. And that's why folks is dance on 1-3 and do some other stuff that you don't have time in this hour to talk about. But the point is that we always felt that rhythm. And that's why when Dr. King spoke, when people say, "Oh, don't speak Black dialect," they're teaching our children how to be ghetto. When you go to the church or to a church and I say, "Good afternoon, everybody. It's so good to be here this afternoon. I'm so happy. I feel so good today." And I can repeat that over and over, and people, because of the rhythm of it, get into it. But if I go in that same church that I grew up in and I say, "Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here this afternoon, and I'm very pleased that you've invited me," that becomes alien to the people in the church. Not that they can't speak that way, but it's a matter of the rhythm in how you speak is something that's very fundamental to the African experience, whether it be in France, whether it be in England, whether it be in Italy. There's something quite fundamental about this. So to conclude, yes, slaves did communicate through rhythm and through melody and through harmony, but it was nothing new to them. They had done it long before they were introduced to Europeans and slavery. Hello?
We're here. I think we need someone just to put their phone on mute, please. Ron, we don't have any other questions in the chat at this time if you want to continue with your questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a perfect timing for this question, Larry, in terms of thinking about music over the years or a timeline. So how has music changed over the years, and is it still an effective communicator of African Americans' beliefs and views?
I think that music, there continues to be, as I said about Chinwe Achebe's quote, you have two, not that one is right and one is wrong, it's what's right or wrong for you. Art for art's sake is a foreign, alien notion to many that come out of the African diaspora. The first primary goal of cultural expression is to make a statement that has political, social, cultural, economic, spiritual components to it. That kind of multiplicity is important. And so the idea that you would desecrate a tree, or that you would slain an animal or anything like that without it having a purpose is really hostile to the African experience, African American experience. And so this idea that the music can be entertaining, but not just entertaining. When we were on the plantation, what would happen on Sunday afternoons, it was time for the slaves to perform for the master. So slaves figured out, and once again, this is political and functional. If we really dance well and sing well and jump all around and do all kind of somersaults, we'll have to do less work on this plantation. So when Sunday came, the slaves would do all kind of incredible stuff that grew into a real art form, and that would mean their work day was less. But at the same time, that was a very functional approach. They weren't just dancing to dance. They were dancing in terms of a way to protest against slavery. And so the idea is that the music today is a demonstration of where we are as a people, all of us. So now I'm going to say this to more make the point. There are periods in African American history and music and culture, periods of social cohesion, and social disruption. The Middle Passage was a period of social disruption. We were torn away from our families, from our land, from our language, from our spirituality, and we were brought to a foreign land. But when we got to the foreign land, oddly enough, under the repression of slavery, that was a period of social cohesion because Africans could unite with one another around family, around music, around all those things, around dance. And they could continue to hold on and have the retention of their African experience. Now, we went from the period of slavery to the period of freedom. Freedom and the great migration to the West and the North and the South, the North, was a period of social disruption. We had no place, we didn't know where we were going. We went looking for our families. That's one of the primary things Africans did, was went and looked for their families. And so we go out the period of the Great Migration to the ghetto or the urban settings. That was a period of social cohesion because we built cities, we worked in so many different capacities. Then came integration. I believe that was a period of social disruption. We lost all of our Black businesses. We lost our Black churches. We lost our radio stations because we started to do something that was developed in Boston called Quiet Storm. And maybe Tamika can speak to that, where a Black DJ said, if we hire all white DJs and they play all Black music, we can really get over, because whites really grew up on this music and this would give them a chance to come out of the closet. Well, what that did is destroyed Black radio stations because they didn't have the budgets to compete with the white stations. So now you have, I hope I don't get sued, but it is alleged. No, it's not alleged, it's true. You have Kiss FM and those formats that really made white DJ stars playing Black music. And so when you look at that, I see this as a period that we're still in of social disruption. Now, when we look at hip hop and rap, we began to get a younger generation that rejected the older generation's music and began to embrace hip hop and rap. But hip hop and rap changed. In the beginning, it was a music that was, instead of gang war, instead of people killing each other, it was all about using that format to compete. Then Hollywood and America and capitalism found out we can make a lot of money off of this music if you just call your mother the B word. We'll give you extra $100,000 if in your lyric you use the B word, but you also remove God from your lyrics. And so you had these poor kids from the urban city who said, hell, and they jumped for it, whereas many of your really authentic hip hop artists were really talking about community development and community empowerment. They were stars, but they were put on the second shelf, and people were willing to take the $100,000 if I call my mother the B word or I use the N word repeatedly. People thought at one point that to use the N word, if we used it enough, we would embrace it and it would take the sting out of it. As Trisha Rose, who wrote the book Black Noise about hip hop, says, folks, you were mistaken. You thought you could do that, but you didn't understand power. You didn't understand the components of power: political power, economic power, social power, and being in a position to define the deviant. And since you couldn't do that, the term did not lose its power, it gained even greater perverse power. So I hope that that kind of gets to your question. I kind of went around to do it, but I want to give a background so people listening can understand the sojourn that we've been through and we're still going through. I was a great critic of some of the hip hop and rap music, and then I began to look at things like the SNL scandal and people who in banking and others taking the money and buying Michael Jackson tickets to take their family to, while people were ripped off in the country and people's savings were destroyed. And then I began to look at that culprit that always rears his ugly head. So now if you go to a concert of Ronald today, one of the most top ranking hip hop artists in the world that won Album of the Year, I'm not going to mention his name, you will see 14 and 13-year-old white kids buying the $500 a ticket for $500. Black people are not going to those concerts; they can't afford them. And so this artist who won Album of the Year, when you go to his concert, you see young white teenagers who are embracing that music, not urban Black kids. And I'll say the last thing, I did a film last year called I Feel Pretty with, I'm blocking her name now, comedian. And the director of the movie, I had a little bit part, he said, "Oh, I'm a hero in my family." And she said, "Why?" Amy Schumer was her name. And he said, "Because I just got my kids tickets to go see this artist, that name I'm not going to mention, but he won the Album of the Year 2 years ago, 3 years ago." He said, "I paid $600 a piece for those tickets." And I said to myself, who the hell is going, not no Black and brown kids I know. And when you listen to his concert, he's talking about Black pain and oppression before an audience of 13 and 14-year-old white kids. It is bizarre.
Hey, that did answer my question, and it looks like from some of the chats we received out there, very well received answer. Anything in the chat, Tamika, before I go to my next question?
Yes, we do have a question asking, what is the theft of rock and roll?
The theft of rock and roll is Little Richard. The theft of rock and roll is Chuck Berry. These people died almost penniless with no teeth in their mouth, while Mick Jagger has $1 million paintings in his home. The theft of rock and roll is not about, I like this music, so I'm going to do it. It is about appropriation and the fact that Bonnie Raitt chose a different position. Bonnie Raitt said, "I am who I am because of this Black blues and other music. So what I'm going to do is start the Blues Foundation, the Rhythm Blues Foundation. I'm going to take these old Black men with no teeth in their mouth on the road with me, sit them right in the front of the stage, and let them reap some of the money that they lost because of racism and Jim Crow." So we don't know that the Beatles were first owned by Little Richard and by a Black record company. And Little Richard said, "I don't want those boys, you give them to somebody else." But the fact is that if you talk to Paul McCartney and you talk to Mick Jagger and you talk to all of them, they all give credit to Black musicians for giving them the impetus and the creativity, sparking that in them to do this glorious music they have done over the years. But even America doesn't give credit. Most young people today, and older ones too, they don't know who a Little Richard is or was or what he did, or Chuck Berry. They don't even know some of the artists that have been out in the last 15, 20 years. So the theft of the music means that there used to be what was called Blacks couldn't be on the radio until after 6, so after dark. It was called race music. So people like Nancy Wilson and others, who many of you won't know that name, who put out about 90 albums before she died, she could not sing on the radio until after 6. That was the same thing as in the South. We had laws that were called sundown laws. Yes, folks, everybody in the room, I want you to understand this is very much a part of music. If you were Black, you had to be in before the sun went down. And so in the same way, you couldn't hear Blacks on the radio, even though we were the architects of this music, until the sun went down. And so if we take the late Elvis Presley, and we're sorry he just lost his daughter, the fact is that Elvis was alleged to have said, and I'll excuse me again, in context, I will use this phrase, I never use it, but in context, I'll use it for the historical record. Supposedly Elvis said, "Only thing niggas can do for me is buy my records and shine my shoes." Now, it is said that Elvis never said that. That was an urban legend that was accredited to Elvis. But the issue is that his manager knew he didn't say it, but he said, "No, let's leave it out there," allegedly, because it will help your sales of the white community, because whites are feeling that you're too close to Blacks anyway. So I think we need to understand there's power in the history of this country. And in this session today, I'm happy to be here, but I really strongly believe that we have to discuss the undiscussable. That's the only way we heal ourselves when we move forward. We have got to stop allowing people who say they love America to propagate white supremacy in terms of the way it's taught in schools. And there's a new gentleman that's put a book out, a white professor at Harvard, called Teaching White Supremacy, where he stumbled on some of this stuff, doing some research for one of his other books. And so that's a very good question that was asked. We need to recognize the theft that has occurred. That doesn't mean that you can't do Black music, but it means that we need to give credit where credit is due. And I could give you some examples, but I won't. Of even recently, one of the songs I'll do at Oswego is I'll do my version of Lift Every Voice and Sing. And a TV station asked to put a piece of my arrangement into a movie. And the powers that be went ahead and approved it and never asked me a word. So then I had to call up my very brilliant attorney in California. She's incredible. And she had to let this major TV station know, and the institution that approved this, if you don't mention, if Larry Watson's name is not mentioned in that piece where that arrangement was used, we will pull back all of the copies of the film and make them recut it. Now, fortunately, they had mentioned thanks to Larry Watson, but this still goes on today. There's no reason why many of our great Black artists are not played on the radio. Students today, now Ronald, you and Mike and Tamika, you'll be surprised that I'm at a music school and students don't know who Donna Ross is. They don't know who Anita Baker is. They don't know, and they're studying voice. It's because we're in a TikTok land now where it's about 2 minutes of knowledge and no more than that. And so it is a very real issue, is appropriation. A very real issue is how music and people's lifestyles and fulfilling their kids going to college has been taken because their music has been taken and used in the mainstream without people giving the credit. Long answer, I'm sorry, folks, but I couldn't do it.
Okay. We have time for one or two more questions. This one is really interesting, and I'd love to get your feedback on it. And I think it plays really nicely based on the last question that was asked. Larry, what can we all do, regardless of our race and beliefs, to use music as a communication device and messaging platform to bring greater good to our society?
We have to be historians. We have to get out of denial. We've got to recognize that America has profited on institutional racism. We've got to understand that when we allow a January 6th to occur and all Americans don't say, stop, this is threatening democracy, this is threatening who we say we are, then we are guilty. The great Jewish philosopher, Joshua Abraham Heschel, said, some are guilty, but all are responsible. We are responsible to correct those historical records, even if it puts our lives, our jobs in jeopardy. That's what Dr. King did. That's why at the content I'm doing at Oswego is an opportunity for me to return with very positive as well as negative memories. But I will come back with a group of musicians and we will do storytelling because I can see how much the institution has grown. But teach one, reach one. We've got to remember what Abraham Joshua Heschel said. Some are guilty, but all are responsible. And if you live by that rule and you call it what it is, then you're a part of the solution. I will also say Charles Hamilton Houston, the first lawyer, dean at the Howard Law School and first Black to graduate from Harvard Law School, he said, you have to make a choice in this society. You're either going to be a social engineer or a parasite. We have too many people in our country who are parasites, and they're taking of the goods. They're loving the music, they're loving the culture, but they're not loving the people as evidence. So I'm hoping at the concert on February 6th, I will be inclusive and embracing, but I will also be a truth teller. there's 5 kind of people in the world that diversity specialists talk about. You have perpetrators. Perpetrators are straight out racist, homophobic, sexist criminals. They're around us. We know some of them. Then after that, you have naive offenders. Oh, how do you get your hair like that? Oh, can I touch it? We have that group. Then we have avoiders. I don't talk about religion and race and that kind of stuff. I stay away from that. When you put avoiders, naive offenders, and perpetrators together, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of Americans. We've got to all move, Ronald, to being change agents, like this organization is doing, where you work within the field you're in and you discuss the undiscussable. And people don't hold it against you because you chose to identify the elephant in the room. And then after change agents, you get some of you, I'm not going to put you in a bind, but I'll say I'm one of them, who are fighters. And fighters are risk it all. Fighters go past change agent because the truth is the truth until the end of time. For Europeans to have co-opted the term classical music, and for Webster to still be in the book saying that it is serious music, it's one of the definitions, is indicative of the level of white supremacy that continues to rear its ugly head in our society. And I think all of us who are here today are committed to a collectivity of trying to eradicate that. But that doesn't come by always being nice and soft-spoken. Sometimes it comes in holding up. For example, I talked about Amazing Grace. According to Amazing Grace, a white slaver wrote Amazing Grace. Let's go a step further. The Star-Spangled Banner. Read the 3rd verse of the Star-Spangled Banner. Read the 3rd verse that says, "We will track you down. There'll be no refuge for you slaves." Read it. I'm not making it up. So now that makes you rethink Kaepernick. Wait a minute. You wanted me to sing and do a pledge that really talks about my complete defilement? So when we look at that, one of the songs I'll do in the concert is Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is the Black national anthem, which the words are told is not about bombs blowing up. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven rings with the harmony of liberty. So when you look at Amazing Grace, you look at the Star-Spangled Banner, you have 2 iconic pieces of music that really is predicated on the reinforcement of institutional slavery. We need to change that in terms of how we look at it. So the most patriotic way I can be is to constructively point those things out so our children grow and are not stuck in that place.
Wow, very powerful. Thank you. I appreciate that. Tamika, we're going to turn it over to April here in a minute. Before we turn it over to April, just wanted to see if there was anything else in the chat or anything else that you wanted to ask or double down on before we kick it over to April to wrap up.
Yes, we do have one last question in the chat, but I must say, I wish, Mr. Larry, that we had 3 more hours with you. I think, Mike, and April, we're gonna need to do a part 2, 3, and 4. And if you invite me back, it'll be the honor of my life. I just love listening to you talk.
Well, thank you. And I love being here, and I've committed my life to education. I call what I do on the stage edutainment. I call my music highly emotional music. And it prides me that I can teach as I have for the last 35, 40 years. And these students in my class, white, black, brown, straight, gay, start out in, Kubler-Ross talks about the stages of death. And the first stage of death is shock. They start out shocked. And then they go from shock to angry. That ass, I can't stand. And then they write me letters and say, thank you so much for opening my eyes and not what came out of your mouth only, but you insisted that I go and read and get my own sources, and I always gave sources to what I was lecturing on. Come on back, baby. Share it with your other teachers to see what they say. And so I am committed to that. I must say to you all, January 6th stunned me. I'm still an optimist, but I'm telling you that changed my outlook radically. But I'm still in the fight. That's why I'm happy to return to Oswego for this concert. I hope many of you will come or at least watch the simulcast. And I'm just pleased to be here with you all. And I've tried to be on my best behavior in terms of being not long-winded. Go ahead.
You've been great. And this is a great segue into this question. Mr. Larry, I love your references to the power of music and spoken word in the classroom. How can teachers empower African-American students, elementary and middle school level, with music? I am a middle school reading and writing teacher in Philadelphia. I would love some recommendations or resources on how to effectively bring this into the classroom.
You have got to get out there with the kids and introduce them to things that they don't know. When we were children growing up, and I'll say this to all the teachers, you didn't like broccoli, you didn't like spinach, but your mother made you sit at that table and eat that broccoli and that spinach, and she would say to you sometimes, you're not getting up until you finish. And you would sit there, oh God, and then you would eat it. And then when you got to be a teenager, you got to Oswego, and you got to taste things that you didn't eat growing up in the inner city. So, oh, them oysters are pretty good. So then you kind of overdosed on the oysters and threw up and puked and then said, I'm gonna never eat oysters again. But you at least tried it. So what I would say to those teachers, there's so many examples and so much work out there online, and I can give you some sources later on, that kids will be blown away and will enjoy some of that music. Donna Ross and Supremes recorded, and many groups recorded at Motown, Does Your Mama Know About Me? Which is one of the first songs that talked about interracial marriages and interracial communications. In the 70s, we had the Loving case that had to go to the Supreme Court because a Black woman married a white man, and they said it was bestiality. And it took Robert Kennedy and others to bring this before the Supreme Court. And now this year, we're still fighting and passing laws to protect interracial marriages. So teacher, how you do that is you do your research and you come back and you cultivate taste in our young people. I've had some major fights at a music school to where I took on certain songs that are out there now, and I went there. And the students threatened a grievance against me. Some of the students, they felt that I was talking about it too much. I said, go ahead with the grievance. Go ahead, go. And no one came and talked to me, because when they went and looked at, I played for my female students a Helen Reddy's song, I Am Woman. When that song came out, it was revolutionary for many people in the corporate world and the bank world. People got fired because women were on the job playing I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. Students in my class, female students in particular in this case, said, oh, the song sounds kind of corny. Because they're not storytellers anymore. They're not reading the lyrics of what the lyrics was saying. I'd like you all to go back and pull out that song by Helen Reddy and play the words, I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. Pull out Curtis Mayfield's piece called We're a Winner, or People Get Ready, There's a Train a-Coming. Introduce your students to songs like this that were entertaining, but also had a profound message. And they were very much in line with being an American. I think we have allowed TikTok culture and people's short attention spans to move us away from our mission. But at the same time, as this new book, you should get it, called Teaching White Supremacy. It's a book out now by Donald Yacone. It's Yacone. And he points out how in public school and elementary school, we're teaching through many of the works we're using white supremacy. That we've got things that talk about how Black women are more eager to be with white men and their plantation owners and that stuff that's still in many of the textbooks that it's being used. It's a very serious matter. So I hope that teachers we play a profound role in just telling the truth. We don't have to be propagandists, and we don't have to go and be partisan. All you have to do is research and tell the truth. Read the third verse of the national anthem. Look back at how Amazing Grace, as the most popular hymn in the world, came about. These are things that you can do.
All right, Tamika. I think we're going to go over to April now, and April's going to wrap us up. But before we do go to April, Larry, I just wanted to say thank you. Learned a lot. Really appreciate meeting you last week and listening to you tell stories today and bringing a lot of this to life. So I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I look forward to maybe returning with you all, but I hope that you all will support us on February the 6th, Monday night at State University College in Oswego for the concert I'm doing called American Fruit with African Roots, the swan song of an affirmative action baby, because I don't have any problems using that term affirmative action, because I was a dean at Cornell, a dean at Harvard. I've sung around the world. And the point is that I know that none of those opportunities will come my way if people just looked at standardized test scores. I would have not been where I am today. Thank you.
Thank you. April?
Oh my goodness. Mr. Larry, wow. Wow. I mean, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, sir. I am so glad that you agreed to join us. You talked about a lot of things that I took a lot of notes. And the first thing I want to let you know is that when Mike and I founded CommonBondz, we agreed that we would discuss the undiscussable.
Mm-hmm.
That there cannot be healing, there cannot be growth unless there's truth. And so you don't have to apologize for truth, because that's who we are at CommonBondz. We decided, yes, it's difficult, it's hard to hear, it's hard to take, but we have to do it. We have to get on common ground, CommonBondz, and tell the truth, and tell it in a way, like you said, here in this type of forum where it's okay to share, and we do it in a way respectfully, but it's still the truth. So, sir, thank you for the truth. That's the first thing I wanted to say. And you also pointed out that what we say matters. Oh, that's a short sentence, but it's so profound. What we say matters. It matters in the truth we tell. It matters how we say it. It matters. It matters if we say it. It matters if we sing it. It
That's
matters.
right. And
So,
what we don't say matters.
that
To
matters
those
as well.
disenfranchised, marginal people looking towards more Eleanor Roosevelts, more Robert Kennedys, more people to take the more partnerships. That's why I'm so honored that you all asked me to be a part of CommonBondz, because you've got to take responsibility and say, I'm not going to wait for my neighbor. We're going to do it.
Amen. Amen. And I'm from the Black church too. So I really felt you. I really felt you. I really felt you. And I'm not going to be long-winded because we don't have a lot of time, but let me see. Singing sets the tone for speakers. That's how, when I tell my kids, don't make me late for praise and worship, because I need the tone to be set. It does something for you when you hear the music, and it just puts your soul in a certain posture, and then you're open and ready for truth. So I agree with you on that one as well. Some are guilty, but all are responsible. I definitely want to end on that.
Abraham Joshua Heschel, who worked closely with Dr. King, who was a Jewish rabbi, who I say that 5 times in every class I teach.
Okay.
Some are guilty, but all are responsible.
I love it. I love it. And it's so true. Sir, thank you so much. And yes, so now You're not a guest anymore. You're partnering with us. You're our friend, you're our brother. And so welcome to the CommonBondz community, sir. We would love to have you back. You know, I just relocated from Pennsylvania to Nashville, so I'm actually traveling. It's so crazy. But anyway, I'm so glad I miss you. I didn't miss you, Ronald. Thank you so much for this. And you also, Tamika, thank you. We can't, Mike and I, do what we do without you. We need you. We need all of you as a community. I don't know if Mike told you our story, but really quickly, there was racism. I worked for him. I worked at the bank for Mike, and something went down under his watch. And he came to my desk and said, April, there's a promotion you should put in for it. He didn't know that I had put in for it, but the white woman would not hire a Black woman. And I told him she would not hire me. I know it's because I'm Black, because I'm qualified. What he did is the reason why we're here.
Mhm.
He didn't make excuses. He didn't give me a counter offer. Well, you know, there'll be other positions you can put in. He didn't do any of that. He said, give me a week. And in a week, I was out of my role and in the new role. And that said a lot, that all I needed to know about who this person was, that he believed my life mattered, Black lives matter. He didn't have the t-shirt. He didn't say I'm not racist. His actions spoke for him. Yeah, his actions spoke volumes. And so we became friends. And then, you know, in 2020, that when we were dealing with the dual pandemic, COVID-19 and racism at the same time, you know, Ahmaud Arbery, who's the young woman who got killed in her bed.
Yes. Yes.
Breonna Taylor.
And then George Floyd. It was so crazy. During 2020, he called me and he checked on me because he knew that I was not okay. And it was at that point where we talked and he said, you know, April, we got to do something.
Well, I commend you all on what you've done. I'm honored to be a part of you all.
Yeah.
I was part of a program in Boston, the late person who worked with Dr. King, called Community Change. And Community Change does similar work, and I'm just honored that I found a niche with another group that still gives me some enthusiasm that we can, when I think of January 6th, I can think of you all as a counterpoint to that.
There you go.
There are people out there that are committed to having us be the country we said we were.
So I'm going to end on this. To your point, I need you to sing for me really quick. I don't feel no ways tired.
You know, this is too much. Because that's what I was going to do. That's what I was going to do. This. I don't feel no ways tired. I've come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me the road.
I don't believe
he brought me this far to leave me. I don't believe he brought me this far. I don't. That's right.
He brought me this far to leave me.
That's
come
right.
far. We can't turn back. We won't turn
right.
back. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
CommonBondz community. Thanks for joining us. And we will see you. Look out for our communications. We will let you know what's coming up next. And we look forward to seeing you. Thank you so much, everyone. Happy New Year.
Thank you, everyone.
And have a wonderful evening. We'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much.
Love you. Boy.